Very busy week. A vice chairman leaving the football club, a game being postponed for coronavirus, and of course a penalty win in there as well. Our vice chairman has left Oxford United. Now, hello everybody and welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. It's back. It's been quite a while, I'm not going to lie. It's been about a week. That wasn't the plan, obviously, and we'll be discussing about why that is in footballing terms. In podcast terms, it's because we haven't had a match, obviously, other than the EFL Trophy game. I'd like to apologise for that because it's been quite a while since I've done the podcast. Obviously, there is a reason behind that, and we'll certainly be discussing about that in just a little bit. Obviously, we've got about 3 topics to go through today, as you can probably see from the thumbnail. If you didn't see the thumbnail, they are obviously the game being postponed, the chairman or vice chairman has left, and obviously we have had a game in midweek in which we did win on penalties. We're discussing all those sort of things as well, and we'll sort of be discussing sort of mainly the game postponement and mainly the chairman. And then obviously the penalty we will sort of mention as well, and we'll sort of be sort of linking reasons sort of why behind that sort of penalty win might influence Saturday, obviously without mentioning too much about Saturday, because obviously that is the Gillingham game, and that will obviously have its own preview that hopefully we'll then have a match reaction for. Obviously that wasn't the case this weekend because our game got postponed. Now if you didn't know why our game got postponed, it basically was because a Crewe Alexander player, or we now know that 4 of them have tested positive for COVID-19. Of course, at the time, we only thought 1 did. Well, there was one that wasn't with the squad that had COVID-19, but somebody else that went off, another player that went out to get a private test, travelled with the squad to Oxford, stayed overnight in Oxford to play the game on Saturday. The Crewe then told Oxford United and said, yeah, by the way, we've got a player here that has got COVID-19, but we're happy to play it. And we basically went, well, no, that wouldn't be ideal, and we're not going to do that because we hear so much about why we've got to be so safe and why we've got to keep so and be so cautious about COVID-19 for obvious reasons. It's a very, very dangerous. Obviously a very, very dangerous pandemic. We know that, so obviously we've got to be extra careful, and we're no different than anyone else, even though we're professional footballers. Before we crack on with this though, if you'd like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, that would be fantastic. If we get 100 subscribers before the end of the year, that would be unbelievable. Obviously, I've been setting little like targets, and you guys have been smashing that. That's unbelievable. But if we can, get to 100 by Christmas or by New Year, that would be unbelievable. That would really show that you guys are enjoying the podcast. I'm loving creating the podcast. So if you could, you could show you love by subscribing and obviously leaving like on episodes as well. It's just what you've been doing, which is absolutely fantastic. And I thank you all so much for doing just that. So let's crack on then with the rest of it. Obviously on Twitter as well, we're at Young Fan Podcast. On Instagram, we're at The Young Fan Podcast. All updates and sort of news on the podcast as well. If you're a bit confused why there wasn't an episode of the podcast at the weekend, if you followed the Instagram or Twitter page, you'd know why that is, because of course the game was postponed. I did say that when it got announced the game was going to be postponed. I said there wouldn't be an episode this week or this weekend of the podcast, and hopefully this should be coming out either Thursday or Friday. If it does come Friday, it'll be a double upload on Friday. It'll be this and the preview. If this comes out on Thursday, which one I'm recording it, if I can edit and get it out on time, it'll be Thursday. I'm just not too sure, but either way, you're either getting a double upload on Saturday, on Friday, or one on Thursday, one on Friday, and then of course the match reaction on Saturday this weekend. It's not coming out on Sunday because it's an early kickoff. I'll be able to get it done and filmed and hopefully up by Saturday. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. A little bit earlier than usual. I don't mind it being early, and hopefully you don't mind it being a little early as well. But let's crack on with this episode then. Game being postponed. We discussed sort of the reason why. Carl Robinson was pretty open after the game and said the reason why was pretty simple. We don't want any of our players to get COVID-19. We don't want to put our players at risk, and we don't want to get more people at risk, which is completely understandable. And like I mentioned earlier, all we hear is about keeping safe and how important it is to be safe for the members of the public, and of course for footballers that's no different as well. Obviously it is the case that that players are getting it, and that is obviously quite frustrating and quite confusing. Why some people are like on up end of the scale. Not that there's a matter who gets it, whoever gets it. Of course, that is a huge problem. And obviously, we wish that they will get better as soon as possible. And it doesn't really matter who gets it, but it does sort of ask questions in terms of you've got people like Sadio Mane, who are probably one of the best players in the world at the moment, playing at the best team in the world, arguably. Or were last year, technically not, on paper, best team in England for sure, but they're getting it, and players, footballers are getting it as well. What are they doing differently? Is it because they're training so hard? They're meant to be the fittest people. They're the people that are, professional athletes that work so hard. How are they still getting it? And I think, to be honest with you, it just proves how contagious and how dangerous this virus is. I don't want to turn into a coronavirus podcast, because I'm sure you could listen to thousands of podcasts about coronavirus. But the game was postponed ultimately because of the virus. So it is important that we stay safe, and it's great that Oxford United called that off. As much as it was frustrating, as much as it was difficult to sort of take as a fan, it's disappointing the weekend comes to Oxford United and it's off. It is a little bit frustrating, of course it is, but it is obviously for the right reasons. We don't want anyone else to get it, of course we don't. Having people getting it anyway is bad, but if we, can prevent it from spreading, that's obviously even better as well. And there's no difference being a football club. We do have the same responsibility to do just the same thing, which is basically what Carl Robinson said anyway. In my opinion, though, I think it does come at... there are people that should up there and higher in the sort of football league pyramid should definitely be looking at this in more detail, because as a fan, and people that don't really look at it like I do, and maybe don't have a podcast and don't need to speak about it as much as I do and how I enjoy, wouldn't really understand this and wouldn't really sort of look at it in more detail. But for me, I have... and I think Oxford United generally have, more than any other club as well, noticed that we need backing and we need support from the EFL. There's some fantastic people in the EFL, like Carl Robinson said, and I'm sure there is. But what we do need to stress is that Oxford United tested their own players using their own money and using their own finances this week. Thankfully, all came back negative, but still, it's frustrating. It is very, 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 very frustrating, because we're having to pay out of our own finances that money. Now, you could argue, be grateful that you're getting a test. Some people can't even have a test, and I 100% understand that. But what isn't fair, in my opinion, is that the top end teams, the more important teams, because they're in the Premier League and because they get more money for sponsorships and all that sort of things as well, they don't get the funding. They get the funding and we don't, which is very frustrating for us, because as sort of lower league fans and fans of lower league sides, these teams are getting tested in Liverpool, Manchester United, and even Championship, I'm pretty sure, as well, and other Premier League teams as well, across the whole board. They're getting tested pretty much, most days. Most days they get tested. Definitely more than once a week. Whereas Oxford United, we get tested when we want to. We get tested for a week before, sometimes before a game, sometimes we don't. It's very, very, very strange. It sort of fluctuates between different things. We have to have a player that's ill before we get a test. For example, Cameron Brannigan last week, 2 weeks ago, but the last game we played against Accrington, felt ill. Now, just because he felt ill, he didn't even get a test straight away. As soon as he came into Oxford United and he said that he didn't feel well, they didn't go, "You've got to have a COVID test." They said, if you still feel ill tomorrow, you have a COVID test. If that was the Premier League, as soon as you feel ill, you get a test, no doubt about it. As soon as you walk into the training ground or into a stadium, you get tested anyway, So, why is it so different? And the obvious reason is because there's not as much money in the EFL than there is in the Premier League, and that's completely understandable. But what isn't fair, I think, is there shouldn't be a difference in health, and warnings of different stages of health, sort of awareness, just because of the league you're in. If you're in League 2, you're still a football player, you're still a professional football player, and that should be the same as if you're a professional football player playing at the highest level. That should be the same whatever. There might be a difference in football, and there definitely will be a difference in football if you're comparing it from Premier League to League 1, of course there is, but there shouldn't be a difference in how you test players, and sort of making sure every player is healthy, and that's what happens. You get games being postponed simply because we're not being tested. You can blame Crew for all those sort of things as well, but the player that turned out to have COVID-19 went off to get his own private test himself because Crew and the EFL didn't fund or allow him to do the testing. Testing isn't free. So he, of course, had to go out his way, and as a private test, he didn't feel very well. He couldn't get a test for Crew. He couldn't get a test for the EFL. He went out and got his own private test, which he paid for using his wages, a Crew player, and he got tested positive. Now, it was also done in pretty rubbish timing. Obviously, he got this test 24 hours before we got on the coach to go to Oxford. Now, what people are arguing is, when you get tested for positive for COVID-19, what you should do is you should not be he shouldn't really be. He shouldn't be around the players. Of course, he shouldn't. But the problem with the crew player was he got it in the hotel. He got a text or an email, or I don't know. He got contact from whoever he got the test from saying you have tested positive for COVID-19. By the time he gets that warning, and by the time he gets the told that he's got COVID-19, he's with the squad anyway. He's travelled on the coach. He's done those sort of things anyway. Now, there's been a sort of rumour behind, did he know before? Did he travel the coach? Did they just try and, turn up anyway and play? I'm not going to sort of throw out any of those accusations. I would like to believe that Crew decided, and as much as Carl is sort of saying, he was the one that said that the game should be postponed, and I believe him, of course I do, but I also don't believe that the Crew manager sort of came in and said, no, we want to play anyway, we have got to play with COVID-19, we don't really care about that, we're going to play anyway. I don't believe that they would do that. I'd like to believe that isn't what happened. And that's just my opinion, of course. That could have happened, but I wasn't there, obviously, to hear those sort of accusations, and I don't believe the accusations as well. The people that are asking for the game to we should get the win and they should forfeit the game because it was sort of their fault. It's not really their fault, to be completely honest with you, because ultimately, if we had a player that had COVID-19. And he'd been the squad in training for the week ahead, and he's been found out on Friday, for example, before the game on Saturday. He's been training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way up to Friday. He could have given it and spread it to the players in those 4 days prior to him finding out. And, we would not, me personally, some people might be, but me personally, I wouldn't want to be going, I wouldn't be happy if Crew players were going, well, it's their fault, they got COVID-19, we should get the points, because technically they forfeited. We didn't really forfeit, and nor did Crew really forfeit, because ultimately, of course, teams would, on a win point of view, it's probably morally wrong, but teams probably would be like, well, we don't want to lose the game, we don't want to lose 3-0 in a forfeit just because you've got a COVID-19, because then you will find that teams will be sort of hiding away from the fact that players don't have it. It's morally wrong and it's horrible to think about. We want teams, of course, to be truthful, and people obviously find out, and obviously they need to be truthful. That's how we stop the spread, and people need to be honest with themselves and help the world out. Of course they do. But if you're starting, just because they've got COVID-19 and start saying, oh, it's their fault, let's forfeit the game, I think that is a little bit wrong on Crew's behalf. And certainly if it happened to us, I wouldn't be happy, because, it's not really our fault that COVID-19 is such a big thing. It's nor Crew's fault either. So that's what happened on the weekend. That's why there's no match reaction. I was going to apologise then. It's technically not my fault, but I'm sorry that I could have made an episode on the Postponed straight after, and I was going to. But if it, it sounds a bit cheesy, it sounds a bit cringy, and it is the wrong side of the world in terms of, Jack, you got to think of it in terms of, think of the people that have got COVID-19 without sounding disrespectful. I didn't really have the motivation to turn on a camera and turn on a microphone to do an episode of the podcast, really just explaining the story of the postponement. People were going to find out, and obviously social media it was very, very, people on social media obviously then, did sort of explain the situation, and that was how it all went. So that's really the game postponement situation. The game has been rearranged. It's going to be played a week Tuesday. No, we've already had Tuesday. A week last Tuesday, so next Tuesday. As well. So the game is going to continue. It's not being forfeited. The game is being rearranged, which of course helps fix the congestion more and more as well. Obviously that does give us less time. Of course it would have been Saturday to Saturday. Now we've obviously got Gillingham, Crew, and then of course Peterborough as well. So we've got 3 big games in the space of about a week. So hopefully we can get the 3 points there as well. But that's not the only thing of excitement this week. There's been some pretty big news elsewhere as well. Oh no, because that wouldn't just be easy enough. Of course, we had to have other things, not just a game postponement, because that would just be too simple at Oxford United this week. It is a week of madness. That's the title of the podcast. It certainly is just that, because our vice chairman has left Oxford United. Now, I'm not going to pronounce the second name because I just don't want to get it wrong, if I'm being completely honest. But the first name, of course, is Zaki. He's vice chairman at Oxford United. Of course, him and Tiger, being the top end of the board at Oxford United, and a very vital part of this football club. The vice, sort of the second-hand man, Zaki, has obviously stepped down. He says that it was a decision that he doesn't take lightly, a decision that was very, very difficult. He's a football fan of Oxford United, and he's going to miss Oxford United as well. He made sure it was the right decision, and he's sort of off on his way as he leaves Oxford United, which is disappointing because, to be honest with you, he just seemed like a really nice guy. Obviously, he did the famous song, the coronavirus song of Oxford United, about how sort of spreading awareness of coronavirus and spreading awareness of staying safe. And speaking about our playoff game as well, He seems like a really nice guy and an Oxford United fan as well, which is what you like to have from a board. Sometimes it's difficult, isn't it, when sort of you have a member of a board that maybe just is business based and solely based on the business side of a football club. To have a sort of a fan of your team, it does make things easier, and Zaki certainly was that. So he is going to be missed. It is difficult. It is going to be a decision now that Oxford United. It'd be nice to hear some news potentially on what happens next, whether or not we're going to go, bring someone else in. It's difficult. Obviously, that was the 7th of October, so that was literally yesterday that announcement was made. And the board have released a statement. They said we have a very strong board here. We will meet soon as scheduled, discuss how we rearrange things without Zaki, but I know I'll still be calling him for advice, especially discuss the matches, because both of us have been obsessed, not just with Oxford the club, but also the football team as that we're trying to build. A lovely statement. Of course, I'm pretty sure that's coming from Tiger. Yes, it is, and Zaki is a good man and a good friend of all of us. He leaves with our thanks for all he has done for us and knows he will be always welcome anytime. So it looks like Tiger's quite disappointed with Zaki leaving, and I think we all are as well, because he seemed like a really nice person. He seemed like a really helpful member of the Oxford United board, and somebody that was really sort of part of the journey, which is frustrating. We are on a journey. We are sort of trying to create something at Oxford United, and he still sort of felt like he was a sole member and a really important member of that, and when somebody like that leaves, it is disappointing. He joined in 2018, and he says that he will remain a fan of Oxford United, even though he's not part of it in that same way. So it is frustrating, it is a difficult one, and it is one that as Oxford United fans, it's going to be interesting to see what happens now, what happens in the transfer market, and what happens in the business side of things, and what happens in the finances, and all those sort of things as well. Of course, the board have sort of sometimes got themselves into a little bit of bother in terms of Kassam and in terms of tax and all that sort of thing as well. Hopefully that thing we won't sort of see that happen again without Zaki here. Hopefully everybody's in the right track and we can sort of stay in the positive way that we're going forward at the moment. That is the plan. That's what I want. I'm sure that's what all the fans want, and I'm sure that's what the board will bring us. So hopefully that is the case. We are losing Zaki. Difficult time to lose him, sort of the start of the season, sort of 3 or 4 games in of the league, 3 games into the league, 5 games, I guess, or 6 games, including cup competitions. It is quite difficult and it is frustrating, but what can you do? Hopefully he moves on to do something better. I'm not sure what he's going on to do, but he's leaving Oxford United. We wish him the best, and we will see you. Hopefully we'll see him about. He might come back. He said he's always welcome, so we'll see what happens there. But we wish him the best in whatever he continues to do. But he's not part of Oxford United anymore, but we thank him for his service and how he helped Oxford United, because I'm sure he did around and about the football club. He seemed like a very important part. That's what Tiger said, so hopefully we don't miss him too much. But, we wish him the best. That sort of situation. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen now. Of course, he did say that we're discussing sort of, we're going to bring in someone else in, and we're sort of discuss how we're going to run things without him. It is difficult. That does sort of scare me a little bit. Why have they not maybe thought about that before? Obviously, they are having to rearrange things, whether or not it was something that they knew that was going to happen, or it was a very sort of outward sort of decision that was made with a click of the finger, for example, or was it something that they knew was coming? I don't know, but either way, hopefully that can sort itself out. In terms of the third thing, in terms of the final thing, the final piece of madness for a week, I'm sure there are other things, but these are the main three madness moments of the week, of course, is the penalty exit of Oxford United in Bristol. Penalty exit for Bristol, of course, but our penalty win. And it feels like we've just had so many penalty shootouts. Of course, I'm pretty sure both Carabao Cup games went down to penalties. This EFL game came down to penalties as well. We have had penalty shootouts, and of course we had the penalty shootout in the playoff last season. We've had a lot of penalties. We've won this one, which is good. Apparently, from what Carl Robinson said, I'm not going to lie, I didn't watch the game. The EFL Trophy isn't something that personally I'm as interested in. I love Oxford United, and I obviously keep note of what's going on in the game. But I didn't watch the game. But from what he said, there were some pretty dodgy performances in some places. But it was a promising day for Alechi. Of course, he made his debut. Alechi, I'm pretty sure that's his name. On Lofthouse, who plays right back. Long played centre back, so a very strange lineup for them. For us defensively, and Jack Stevens in goal as well. We had a pretty strong midfield. An attack as well. We had, I think it wasn't it Hall playing and Sykes, and it was Osai up front, if I'm not wrong. So a very rotation side for Oxford. Whether or not that's something that that was planned, or that was something that we were sort of forced into due to injuries. Of course, we've got some good news on injuries, of course, that we will be discussing in the preview. All I'm going to say is 3 big players are coming back and will be available for Saturday's game against not Crewe, against Gillingham, and then Crewe after that. Another one as well. We won't be doing obviously another match preview for the Crewe game. We don't need to do 2 match previews, so there won't be a preview for that one. But if you are interested in watching the preview again, sort of discuss Crewe, then you can go and check that out. That was the last episode of the podcast as well, so you can check that out as well. But there is going to be a preview of the Gillingham game and a match reaction before that. But it's good to see that we weren't in the penalties, of course. We're now top of the group. We were top of the group anyway, I'm pretty sure, but we're certainly top of the group now. We went 1-0 down. Osai equalised as well, which is good to see. And we were top of the group now in the EFL Trophy. Like I said, it sounds a little bit, glory hunty, glory in a way. But we do sort of care about the competition when it gets to the semi-finals, quarter-finals, and of course the final. Whether I was going to say it's a trip up to Wembley, but will it be a trip up to Wembley in the circumstances? I'm not too sure, but either way, hopefully we can continue being successful, and hopefully we can continue doing well in that competition as well. Every game won is confidence, and every piece of confidence will certainly put us in and help us put us in the right direction going forward. Of course, 2 games in the league that we've lost, a win in the league as well, and we've got Gillingham coming up as well, and another win in this competition certainly will help the confidence going into Saturday. But yeah, a very, very busy week. A vice chairman leaving the football club, a game being postponed for coronavirus, and of course a penalty win in there as well. 3 things that are pretty different, very different from each other. But 3 things we needed to recap on, we need to discuss. The chairman leaving, of course, is something that, I had to sort of mention if we're talking about Oxford. And of course, the game being postponed, I didn't mention it sort of when it happened, but I have done now, of course. And the penalty exit as well. I keep saying the penalty exit. The penalty win, of course, is something that I wanted to discuss. Because obviously it is a game for Oxford United that does have importance going forward. And hopefully that is something to the winning mentality, is something still and continuing to happen. So that's that. Also, I know it's a bit at the end of the podcast, and if you're still watching this episode now, that's fantastic. You should have noticed it should be different lighting. If I move that down now. It should be different lighting. That's not what I wanted to do. There should be different lighting on the podcast. I've brought 2 lights and got 2 lights now here, so hopefully there is a difference. I will be sort of adjusting the light. I don't know if it's too bright or not. I don't know how sort of it's working, and hopefully it doesn't look horrible. On the camera, I can see the camera now. I actually have a camera that I can see what I'm recording, sort of like a flip screen sort of thing. So from what I'm looking at, it looks okay, but hopefully it is okay for you when I look back at it, and hopefully for when you sat and leave a comment if you like it. Leave a comment if there's something you let me know. Basically, if it's okay, if there's anything that I can maybe do to change it if there's a problem. I'll be a good judge of that when I stick it on and edit it. I'm sure I'll have my own thoughts on how it is, but I just think we need a bit of light. Hopefully it will sort of help and make it basically look better. That's what I want to do. So hopefully you enjoy this episode of the podcast. I certainly have. It's a nice recap. If this comes out on Friday, then it'll be 2 uploads. This should come out sort of midday-ish, 11 o'clock, midday sort of thing, and then the preview should come out after that. If this comes out on Thursday, which I'm not sure if it will, looking at the time now, if it doesn't come out at midday, then it will be keep getting them days mixed up. On Friday, it should be coming out today, which is Thursday as well. Either way, though, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. It has been a week of madness at Oxford United, and hopefully that's something that calms down a little bit. Can we have a week of winning at the weekend, and then we just go on a nice run? We obviously got a midweek game on Tuesday as well, which is going to be very, very interesting. Hopefully that is something that we can pick up 3 points with, and we hope we can. And there'll obviously be a preview for the Gillingham game, like I mentioned, but not for Crewe. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I'm sorry it's been a little while, but hopefully, hopefully it's nice to see me back. Hopefully it's nice for the podcast to be returning. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. It's much appreciated. Thanks very much for the continuous support on the podcast, and I will see you later. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.